Ask hard questions. The sky won't fall, except when it does. Now, we saw in the last episode that asking hard questions of the tradition is the tradition. It's not a threat. It's actually how the tradition renews itself. But even so, hard questions, we saw, evoke uncertainty. And uncertainty, yeah, it makes folks kind of squirrely. So in this episode, let's talk about tools that will help us ask those hard questions and maybe not burn the place down. How do we do that? How do we ask hard questions and not evoke the crazy? Here are a few tools that I've used through the years. The first I called dialectical lessons. You've heard the term straw man argument. We set up a very weak version of some perspective that we don't agree with, and then we shoot it down. And shooting it down is easy to do because we made the argument weak in the first place. People do that all the time. The opposite of a straw man argument is a steel man argument. We make the best case for some perspective, not to shoot it down, but to grapple with it, to hold tension between it and our own perspective just to see what there is that we can learn. It's an exercise in getting comfortable with paradox. It's an exercise in holding two seemingly mutually exclusive insights and holding them in our mind at the same time to see what we can learn. So here's a quick example from early in our community. Early on, we had stopped doing rituals. The rituals that we knew about carried language that we were deconstructing, so we just stopped rituals. But before long, we missed them. Ritual, it turns out, is a very human thing to do. So we started a project rewriting our rituals. And when we came to our Welcome Our New Babies ritual, we looked at Christian rituals, we looked at other traditions as well. It became an opportunity for me to use some dialectical lessons. Let me explain. Now, you probably know that churches either baptize babies and confirm adolescents or dedicate babies and baptize adolescents. So, over a few Sundays, I gave a steel man argument for each. In the one, I told the story of covenant theology. I didn't use that term. Nobody needs more jargon. But in that, I spoke about how divine belonging and communal belonging just are. We don't earn them. They're a birthright. They are part of being human. That's what baby baptism celebrates. Now, the next week, I told about free church theology. Now, again, didn't use the term. I spoke about how our role and our internal freedom and our will and our decisions matter. They make a difference. That's what baby dedicating celebrates. And I told them both as beautifully as I could and then asked, what if we hold both perspectives, hold them in tension, what might we learn? Now, it's not the point, but in the end, we ended up offering two rituals, let families decide, but then we would highlight the beauty of whatever one they chose. So it was an exercise that was a little bit about rituals, it was, but it was also about a tool to help us ask hard questions of the tradition and maybe not burn the place down. I used to frame a lot of lessons that way. Whatever the topic was, I would say, some folks will hold this view, and I would give the best version of that view that I could. Other folks will hold that view, and I would give the best version of that. But for me, lately, I've found that this has been helping me. But what about you? What do you find to be most helpful? So, there's a tool, dialectical lessons, a way, without the sky falling, to help our folks feel the permission to question the tradition, to help our folks see that it doesn't have to be either or. It could be both and maybe we could relax a bit. Now, the second tool I used, what are you thinking? When people talk about our community, that's one of the things they talk about most. After the lesson, they say, the minister opens the floor and asks us what we think. He spends 20 minutes framing the conversation with the lesson, but then we spend the next 20 minutes commenting, sharing stories, and sometimes objecting. Well, I started that practice when we were just a small church plant. There were 7 people in the room, so it really felt natural back then. But then we were 50 people in the room, and then we were 100 people in the room. And what had happened during those times when I opened the floor was so valuable, we just never stopped. I knew even back then that I was asking people to think differently about religion. I was asking people to think differently about spiritual community. And I knew that they would need some space to object. They would need space for challenging and disagreeing. That's important when we're beginning to think new thoughts. But honestly, I thought we would outgrow the practice. We just never did. In fact, we modified our building plans relatively early on and added services so that we would never have to build a room so big that we couldn't do what are you thinking? Well, back when that practice was strange for folks, I would often prime the pump a little bit. I would ask folks that I knew in advance, and I'd ask them to disagree with me, to do it respectfully, but disagree with me. Say something like, Doug, I don't think you're considering this, or Doug, what about that? And when they did, I would kind of celebrate the hard questions. Oh, that's a great question. I am not sure we have an answer to that yet, but here's what we have. We have this, what I had just said in the lesson, and we have that, what the person had just said, and both seem important. So tell me, what do you think? What do you think about that? And over time, what are you thinking just became our thing. And it did deepen our learning, it helped deepen our engagement, but it also normalized questioning the tradition without the sky falling down. So often we would learn something that we didn't know. By juxtaposing different perspectives alongside one another, we would learn new things. So many times I would actually change the next week's lesson to follow up with some historical context because of something that was brought up during What Are You Thinking? It was such a great learning tool. We almost didn't notice that it was also giving us permission to question the tradition. So, dialectical lessons. What are you thinking? And third, changing the question. When folks start asking hard questions, what they're usually asking is, am I right or am I wrong? It's just the binary world we live in. It's the binary brains that are in our heads. Instinct, trying to sift truth from error. But as leaders, we can help switch up that question for our folks. We can switch from true, false, good, bad to what happens to us if we hold this belief? What happens to us if this becomes our story? We use the question a lot. In the 90s in our town, because there was a debate going on among one of the biggest denominations here, there was this vigorous debate going on whether women should be ordained or not. Right after that, the fight shifted to should we or should we not embrace queer folk? So in both of those controversies, the question helped us. What happens to us if we tell women? What happens to us if we tell gay folk that they do not have equal standing in this community? They do not have equal standing before God. Now, the first time we asked that question was way earlier than that. It's the story I referenced a few episodes ago, Rethinking Our Afterlife story. What happens to us if our story says God made us with the capacity to sin? That's omnipotence. God made us knowing we would sin. That's omniscience. And then when we did sin, just as God planned, God blamed us and trundled us off to eternal torment, saying all along the way, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. Well, that's a mean-spirited story. That's a God is a hypocrite story. And you might have heard what people say about Christians, mean-spirited and hypocritical, which invites the question, what happens to us when that or that or that becomes our story? It's a question that helps clarify for us times that we have to question the tradition. Dialectical lessons, what are you thinking, changing up the question, and finally, deconstruction groups. We've done those. Recently, I surveyed one of our deconstruction groups and I asked for discussion topics for the upcoming term. And one woman was a little bit hesitant, but she finally said, well, this whole Easter thing, I'm not sure I buy it. And I'm pretty sure that puts me out of the club. Whatever club you have to believe in Easter to belong to. So we had that discussion in the group. It was a great conversation. Turns out a lot of people had thought those thoughts, but the tool was the group. And the group gave her a place to say out loud what it turns out had been in her mind for 15 years. The thought had been in there telling her all that time that she did not belong. Without that group, she might never have asked it out loud. Without that group, she might never have processed it, never have come to a peaceful place on the other side. So there is another tool. Groups that are designed specifically to talk about the things people do not feel permission to talk about. That will help us ask hard questions of the tradition. So we saw in the last episode, our questions do not threaten the tradition, they are how we revitalize it. In our experience, the questions have made our spirituality bigger, more universal, more compelling, not a threat, an invitation to life on the other side. So, that wraps up this series. Insights for rebuilding spiritual community, building on the wisdom of Socrates, pulling in Judaism, Christianity, and Buddhism. Tools and culture to help us become self-aware. Tools and culture to help our traditions become self-aware and help us rebuild healthy spiritual communities. I love doing it. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm writing the next series right now. How are we going to build healthy spiritual communities living as we do in the time of late stage capitalism? Well, if you'd like to get notified when that one comes out, go ahead, subscribe.